On this record, Horrendous have really broken down their sound to allow probably the most freedom they've ever had. Ontological Mysterium is leaps and bounds ahead of everyone else out there. Hi guys, welcome back, and hello if you are new. So I have been really excited to talk about this album for a very long time. Horrendous are a band that have been slowly but surely carving their own niche ever since their first release, which was The Chills. The band have, I think, maybe one of the most unique sounds in metal today, and really kind of defy any form of classification, I would say. So join me as I delve into Horrendous's Ontological Mysterium. So if you might not be familiar with Horrendous, or you might not have heard them before, they kind of play, I would guess, the best thing I could describe it as is cavernous, mystical, progressive death metal. And that is kind of, I would say, it's such a hard band to sort of say, you know, like for fans of or something like that. But Atheist, Death, Cynic, you know, that kind of era sort of material, I would say. But there's so many other influences in this melting pot, and in particular on Ontological Mysterium. Their sound is incredibly unique, and I would say almost at times moves into a vibe, if that kind of makes sense. You know, Horrendous is almost like kind of just it's just a feeling. Whereas Idol, their previous album, was shrouded in mist and cloaked in enigma, Ontological Mysterium seethes with passion and joy, with a flame that burns incredibly bright in this cosmos of theirs. Thematically, the record is kind of this idea of generation up until a point where it's so endlessly generative that it actually kind of collapses in on itself. I think where it comes to sound, with Horrendous, the band will very much kind of go in whatever direction they've chose, and you're kind of along for the ride, if that makes sense. With that in mind, though, I think that on this record, Horrendous have really broken down their sound to allow probably the most freedom they've ever had. From the moment that the intro track, The Blaze, kicks in, we're sort of moved into these classic, really high-pitched harmonies, really cool leads, that immediately reminded me of like new wave of British heavy metal, kind of like Judas Priest sort of style. And there's moments of Voivod-esque madness on Neon Leviathan, but then there's sort of jazz stargazing in Aurora Neoterica. Which is followed up by, later on in the album, Preterition Hymn, which has this really interesting use of flute and acoustic guitar, which kind of lends it to a bit of a folky sort of idea, which sounds like it's really kind of out there and, you know, sort of out of the box. But because Horrendous have put it together, it all kind of sits within that same kind of cosmos. And like I said, you know, as jarring as that might sound, with Horrendous at the helm, it just kind of becomes, sure, why the hell not? Let's listen to that. Let's try that out and see how it works. And the overall feel of this album, I think, is so much more free and kind of jam-like. You know, you can imagine that a lot of these sort of seeds started off, you know, as this kind of a small idea, and then it kind of, you know, they were jamming something here, and then maybe that kind of happened, and then that was a bit left field. But equally, you can also tell that I think everything's been really combed over and make sure that everything is there for a reason. You know, there's no fat on this record. It's very lean, and I think that's one of the biggest sort of positives about it, is that it is actually short. I remember when I first listened to it, I was like, oh man, I just want more. So you dive back in, but because there's so many layers on the songs, there's always something to keep you interested and keep you excited about what you're hearing. There's also the jam feel in how they play. I just feel like the way that these guys perform with each other, you know, just sounds so fluid and free, and almost like they have sort of like this hive mind together and they know exactly what's going to happen. And, you know, I mentioned that the record is a bit shorter, which it is, but the thing is they haven't lost any of the sprawling epic feel. It's just basically made it even tighter. And as with every Horrendous record, the production on this is absolutely perfect. Damien Herring has done an absolutely stellar job. He makes sure that nothing kind of dwarfs the mix, but everything kind of, you know, is organic and again lends it to that sense of this sort of mysterious kind of jam-like feel. Where solos are concerned on this album, there's so many. I feel like leads are very much kind of like omnipresent here. They're just kind of all over the place at all times. Some of the best moments of solo work, though, for me, is Exogenesis, which is kind of, I would say, not a very conventional way of putting a solo together. It's very much kind of like broken down and deconstructed in many ways. But then that's kind of set the stage for the Death Knell Ringeth, which is like the climactic mega solo, you know, like when they just kind of like go full pelt with that awesome riff behind it as well. It's so, so, so cool. And I think, you know, in a weird way, there's kind of this sort of contrast between the ethereal and the hellish on this album as well. But I think the ethereal's represented in like, you know, carefully chosen bass lines. They've got lead sections, keys, which kind of creates this sort of almost like a glow around the songs. And then you've got that celestial kind of clean guitar, clean vocals on Chrysopia, Gregorian kind of style choir on a Preterition Hymn. But then it's kind of countered by this sort of hellish, sort of demonic side of the band where, you know, you've got these anguished vocals, this weird vocoder thing that comes together on Exogenesis, which kind of has that sort of demonic presence about it, which I really liked. So it's kind of like these two contrasts often kind of fighting together and kind of coming together as well at the same time and sort of absorbing the two. Even for a band whose inertia moves them forward with every release, Ontological Mysterium is leaps and bounds ahead of everyone else out there. And it's an enormous step forward for not just the band, but I would say death metal as a genre itself. But yeah, absolutely fantastic, total masterpiece of an album. So for that reason, I'm going to give this album a 9.5 out of 10. Absolutely exceptional. So thank you ever so much for tuning in. Always appreciate your help and everything. If you could hit that like and subscribe button, that'd be amazing. Don't forget to check out my interview with Horrendous, and I will see you guys very, very soon for another video. Take care, my friends.